Hey guys, just a quick heads up. We're learning this podcast thing in real time. And as a part of that, we experienced some audio technical difficulties in this episode, but the conversation was so good, we didn't want to hold it back. So enjoy this, but look for more improved, high fidelity conversations in the future. So last time that we gathered, we talked about barriers to unity. Unity sounds great, but is actually hard to live out or create. It takes intentionality. It really is a fight for unity. And so today we want to dive into a topic a little bit deeper, this topic of pride and how humility is the cure for pride in creating unity. And so I think we kind of start by defining terms, make sure that we're all working with the same language, and look at pride, because pride can be like a double-edged sword. It can be both a good thing and a bad thing. I want my team to take pride in their work, but I don't want pride to be a barrier or people to be overcome by pride. So how do you guys define pride?
Wow. Diving right in.
Group alliance.
We're doing this again.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, group alliance. I thought you were trying to force me to talk again. I thought we were doing that whole bit again. I was like, oh God.
This is funny though.
No bit.
What did you hear me say?
I don't know, honestly. I just saw you both look at me and I panicked.
She said group alliance. And I was like, yeah. No, group of lions, a pride of lions.
Oh, yeah. I didn't hear you either.
Deep cut. Yeah, everybody just nodded.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Group Alliance, that's what I heard.
I just automatically deferred to you're making fun of me, so
Never.
that's sweet. Okay.
Oh,
Yet.
Yeah. Yeah, so pride, what is it?
I think pride is it's such a weird, I think there's a way that it's typically viewed, like you were saying, like this negative aspect of pride. But I think it just shows up for everybody based on your personality in so many different ways. That it's not necessarily just like having a really big ego or super boastful in who you are, what you're capable of. But I think it manifests and is a barrier to unity in so many ways, because I think it just keeps you from seeing another person for who they are, listening to that person. We can be so self-focused.
Yeah.
And I don't think people think about it as being prideful, but we just get so stuck in our own heads and our own world and our own minds. And that's, you're not really seeing the person in front of you or next to you or whoever that might be when pride is there.
Yeah.
So.
Reminds me of that, the spotlight effect. You know, the idea that we go through the world thinking everyone is noticing us when they don't. I think they did this experiment where these guys wore these really wonky t-shirts with weird phrases on them, and they would walk through a busy park, and then afterwards they went around and asked all the other people, did you notice what their t-shirt said? And nobody noticed. Out of thousands of people, not one person. But I think that kind of speaks to what you're saying, that we just go through life way over personalizing everyone else's actions, that we're the center of their universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's talked about a lot in high school, like, oh, you need to tell high school kids, like, no, don't worry about what people think, that high school kids are so focused on what others think. I think we don't really grow out of that.
Yeah.
I think everybody is that way. We're all so worried about what other people think. Like, all I'm thinking about is what you guys think about me. I'm not thinking about you. I'm not thinking about you. Like, I'm just worried about what you think about me. And that's, if everybody's doing that, then nobody's thinking about anybody else.
Yeah.
And so
It's hard to unify with that banner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which maybe is freeing in some aspects. Like, nobody's thinking about me, but maybe that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
At the same time, I don't know.
Here's my encouragement to everyone. Nobody cares. You care way more than anybody else cares. But yeah, okay, I think by defining pride generally as self-focus versus others focus opens up a wide net where everybody can say, I deal with pride in some way, in some respect. Because self-attention could be ego boosting. Like, I know all the answers and I'm the smartest, most good looking, most powerful man in the room. But it can also be self-attention in the negative, right? Like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I have so much fear and doubt, and everybody's looking at me, and I'm gonna mess up, and this is all on my shoulders. And if I, all of that fear is still
Yeah.
rooted in pride.
Yep. I look at it through the lens of what's motivating me. And if pride is motivating me, that will often motivate me to action. Or sometimes pride motivates me to inaction. And either of them are bad. If, to me, pride is the motivator for whatever is about to, then that's where I tend to go wrong. That's what tends to keep me from being able to unify with people. If that's the motivator to either action or interaction.
Yeah.
How do you think you determine if that's your motivator or not?
It goes back to the self-focus. If the only thing that I'm thinking about in that moment is myself, self-protection, self-adulation, whatever it is, it's like, well, that's the thing that's like motivating. Sometimes, honestly, though, it's indistinguishable. Like there are noble things that we get to do, for instance, or I get to do, and sometimes it's hard to distinguish between whether or not I'm motivated out of the nobility of what we're doing, or I'm motivated out of the fame or the celebrity in what we're doing. I think that sometimes it's really hard, which is why we need community, so that we can tell each other or speak into that truth. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think self-awareness is key, right? Like you're always striving for self-awareness and selflessness. Doesn't mean you're always going to hit the mark. And it's going to present in a lot of different ways. And I still default to self-focus and security.
Sure.
But I always want to keep myself in check for who I want to be.
Yeah.
Knowing that my belief on who I want to be is going to be my best self. It's going to pull me forward to actually becoming that person.
Yeah.
So how do you get... Okay, lots of ways to screw this up. Thinking through, and I'm learning about ADHD, and I'm learning about marriage, and you can be enmeshed or detached, and both are wrong. I think the same is true with pride. Like, I can be overbearing, or I can disconnect to protect my pride. Both are wrong.
Yeah.
So how do you find a right relationship with pride? I want people to be proud of who they're becoming, and proud of who they're creating, like to own their greatness and be proud of their work, but at the same time not be overcome by that. How do you find a right relationship with pride?
I don't know that I have the answer. I know that it is a tough needle to thread. Like I guess I would say that for me, it's having people who are willing to be honest around me, and then starting to recognize patterns. There are moments and things that are happening throughout the day that I can feel like this tug toward pride. And then there are other actions and moments throughout the day that I can feel this tug towards service. And those are two things that are hard to exist simultaneously for me.
Yeah. I think pride a lot of the time is rooted in comfort. And so, like, for me, I have to identify, I think I disguise my pride as fear. I think it's, well, I'm like afraid, but really it's out of protection of like my ego or my pride. And so it's putting myself into comfortable situations. And so I think as often as you can, like, put yourself outside of anything that feels comfortable, because then you're not dependent on what you're good at. You're not dependent on what you know. You're not dependent on anything really. And so that pushes you outside of yourself, and you have to look to somebody else. You have to gain wisdom or influence from somebody other than just what you're capable of. And so it's finding those opportunities to put yourself outside of your comfort zone, to push you past pride.
So it's interesting. You are really good at looking out for the needs of other people. Are there moments when you're doing that are motivated out of pride?
I think so. I think I struggle with, I think at the core, I do want to love and serve people, and I want to make people feel like they matter, but that sometimes is out of a desire for me to be needed. Like that feeds my ego or my pride that they needed me in order to be okay or to do what they needed
Yeah.
to do. And that feels really good.
Yep.
And so it is a hard line of figuring out, am I just serving or meeting their needs because it makes me feel good about myself, or is it because they actually needed those things to be met? And it's hard, but I struggle with it for sure. And that's why I think going back to that uncomfortable situation, like if they need something from me that makes me feel uncomfortable, not in like a negative way, but
Right.
it's going to push me, then maybe I should do it.
Yep.
Because it's going to challenge me. And if it's not, it's so easy for me to do, maybe somebody else can meet that need for them instead of me. And I can, sometimes it's a sacrifice for me to let somebody else meet the need and not just me.
Yeah, I think that one of the ways that maybe you can, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but one of the ways, the litmus tests, as I'm thinking through this for me too, is like that fine line. Often I think on the other end of it, am I more unified with that person after the exchange? So we're talking about like, how does pride affect unity? I almost think about how does unity affect pride?
Yeah. So unity as the goal.
Yeah,
and
and
that
then
draw you into
that's right.
being more selfless,
Yep.
more humble.
Yeah, or whatever that person needs.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there are times when I feel drawn to serve in a particular capacity, but after that interaction, it's not really what they needed in that moment. Maybe they needed some truth, or maybe they needed, I don't know. I just think, looking back and saying, well, I wonder, are we drawing closer together from that interaction, or are we, further apart?
Yeah. No, that's good. I think that's the countercultural approach towards business and organizations that we get to cultivate, right? Like pride says projects based, we got to get stuff done.
Yep.
Humility says love and serve the other person, and they'll build your organization, your business for you.
Yep.
Invest in people.
And I think that one of the ways that I go wrong in that is I think, okay, if I'm a certain way, and we've all seen those scenarios by which you have maybe a magnet, you draw it, and then little steel balls get all attracted to it. Like
It's like the hair thing, the face.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those little tiny.
You know what I mean? Like you can
yeah.
just, and everything's drawn to it. And I think that maybe sometimes I go down this path of like, well, if I'm a certain way, then I'm going to attract, and that attraction creates momentum or success, maybe in business or culture, like whatever we're trying to build. But the more I've been thinking about that, it's like, I like the idea of the magnet, but it's like I'm a multifaceted magnet. And you know how, some magnets attract and some repel. And it's like, if I walk into a room and I really know who's in the room, I gotta figure out like what facet needs to show up. That to me is what drives unity. Whereas I think we're taught that if we find this inner beauty, this inner selfless person, it has universal attractiveness. And I don't know. The more I don't know that that's true. I feel like there's just different facets.
Well, I think it's identifying, at least for me, in that struggle to be needed. Like, what do they actually need versus what do I think they need, or what's going to make me feel good?
Yeah.
If I'm really good at something and I see somebody struggling at it, well, let me just go do that for them. It's not actually meeting their need. That's me proving that I could do it. And that's not helpful and that's not unifying. But to serve them in humility, and I do know how to do it, but that's not going to solve it. Let me teach them.
Yeah.
And get them to understand why they can do it is way more unifying, but it doesn't feed my pride in the same way. But it can still walk away being like, hey, I did something really positive, but it wasn't just, well, I'm good at that, so let me show you that I can do it. I don't need to prove my worth in that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This might totally fall short, but I'm thinking about that face and the magnet and the little, is it magnet dust?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, right? And so one approach, the power's in the magnet. The magnet's what draws people to it. There's a lot of different things that draw people to that magnet. Maybe it is, intelligence, or maybe it is how kind they are, or charisma, riz, as the Gen Zers say. Like, the thing is, though, when that magnet moves away, if it gets far enough away, everything just settles.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually do anything, because it's just momentum when the leader is there.
Right.
We want to create multiplication so that when I leave, everything is still moving.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah, that didn't fall short.
Not at all.
Okay.
No. That's
Like,
good. You don't
nailed
want to unify around one person.
Yeah.
Right.
You want to unify around
A
something
mission, a purpose.
Yeah, it's got to be beyond that one person.
Mhm.
I think too, as we're going down this journey of figuring that out, there's this reality, and we've tossed this word around a lot, but in order to get there has to be a level of empathy.
Mhm.
I think empathy and humility are kind of in the same conversation, because
Yeah.
it's like when I'm trying to figure out who to be in that moment. We had a scenario happen where an employee came in, gave us some news, and I remember sitting there going, I don't know if this is good or bad. And so I just asked them, how does this make you feel? Does it make you feel good or feel bad?
Mhm.
And their response actually surprised me. And that they thought it was more of as a bad thing. My whole point is, slow down, like, intake where they are, like, try to understand. If I'm going to have to try to be something that's attractive in that moment, it's like, living out this empathy to understand how to show up. And I love your example, like, well, what do they need from you in that moment? Well, sometimes we need to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
Don't assume you know.
Don't assume, because I always assume. But in that process, I think we get to accomplish what you're talking about. It kind of gets extended outside of just who I am into that other person in a way that I think bigger things get done out of unity, because it's not just about us in that moment.
Yeah. I love getting together with you guys because we all have very different perspectives. Some more different than others, but it rounds me out and expands my worldview. And I think it makes us a great team, right? We're able to unify behind a purpose, even if we all do it in different ways.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about Enneagram and triads. There's like different centers.
Yeah.
Right? There's the mind, there's the gut, there's the heart.
You pointed to your heart when you said gut.
Yeah, gut's out of frame. Hopefully the gut is out of frame.
Yeah, I covered mine again.
Yeah. And so Enneagram 8, gut-centered. Enneagram 2, heart-centered. Enneagram 7, mind-centered.
Yes.
How do you guys think, like, just those are they're not preferences. They're how you naturally default to seeing the world and seeing people. How do you think those shape how you engage with this topic of pride or humility as you work with other people?
Yeah, I think we talked about this, like, kind of being in the gut, where it's like instinct. I wish I were in the head, and then there are days that I wish I was in the heart. It's like I find myself with a little bit of both, so I don't get to live in the fullness of either. And so I struggle with, well, if I'm thinking about it from a pride perspective, it feels a little out of control to rely on my instincts. It doesn't feel like I could really. Remember, I talked about empathy. Well, that's really hard if I'm not operating in full emotion. If I'm not able to be a Kenzie, I sometimes think, oh man, I don't know that I could fully understand how they feel about something. I feel like a little bit unable to fully step into that. And then I think about from the mind or the thought process, I'm like, I don't know that I can step into that fully either. So it leaves me often in this like instinctual response to things and feeling like out of control. And that's why I said early on, like, sometimes I don't know if it's a pride thing or I'm like trying to live out this nobility or this responsibility. I struggle with those concepts to really divide it. So I then convince myself, well, it's because of how I cope with the world that I can't figure that out. I wish I could cope with it by thinking it through more and slowing down and being more logical. And then other days I'm like, well, I wish I could really have more in touch with my emotion.
Yeah.
So it just kind of often for me, it leaves me just like instinctually responding, but not really knowing. Like, how is this being taken? Like, how should I be showing up? What's required of me? Yeah. Incomplete.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's kind of what I was sitting here thinking about is like how I can borrow from you. Your superpower is to be able to, be empathetic and relate to the person right in front of you, to be present. And I can watch you and I'm just going to try what she did.
Yeah.
Like that seemed to work. I'm going to practice that. And eventually over time, it rounds me out and I start to build that muscle and I'm able to better practice that, knowing that my default is just to turn this into a big logic formula or a thought. It's always philosophical and never practical.
Yeah.
So you challenge me to slow down and be with the person right in front of me. And I think that's really good.
Yeah.
And then you challenge me not to always just think, but to actually do. Because I think sometimes I want to think until I've got it all figured out and then present it to the world.
Yeah.
When sometimes I want 70% done and out there. And then let's, test it. Let's create an MVP and then test it is better than never leaving the shelf. Because it's not perfected or ready, or I'm scared of what the world is going to say about it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic of of insecurity, and like I just live in envy all the time, which I think in some ways is a little bit of pride, because it often will keep me inactive. I just am like, well, that's just not who I am. Whereas, like you're, saying you see her and then you model it. That to me is the opposite of pride. It's like putting into practice this learned
willingness to learn.
Yeah.
I have so many thoughts. I feel like you're both downplaying your abilities.
Because we're the most humble.
Yeah, but I think
we're completely unified now.
Yeah, we took a vote before the show. It's us, most humble.
And so, there should be a balance between all of these things where we recognize where we naturally tend toward, and then we see the good and the bad of where that can take us. And then extending like into community. And I feel like community is like the buzzword that answer all the time. You just need people, which you do. But to put yourself in as many situations where you can learn from other people. Like, I could sit and just feel all day long and then nothing would get done, nothing would get thought about. But I think that's like the comfort again, that safe place. I can empathize and that's great. And that is a superpower. But if I just rely on that and don't challenge myself in either of those areas, then all I am is the person who can empathize,
Yeah.
And then I can get rooted in that pride. Well, nobody else can empathize like me, and so it's, you got to understand both sides to it and then figure out how to surround yourself with people that can bring out the good and challenge you with the bad.
I think maybe what you're saying, and I think what we're kind of grappling with, is replacing envy with value. Like, instead of envying you guys, it's like, we'll just value you. And then out of humility, like, we get to unify on solving these problems, whatever these things are, whether it's interactions, whether it's tasks or project, whatever it is. It's like, well, if I just get rid of envy, which I think is a negative form in some ways of pride, then I'm focused on a value, which is now saying and extending humility to you guys, saying, hey, I don't know. I need that help, and I need to be a learner on how you're seeing the world, and there's value in that.
Being vulnerable with it.
Yeah.
Like, modesty is way more appealing than, like, I have all the answers. Humility is way more unifying than pretending like, okay, I don't know, but I'm just going to pretend I do so that I'm not exposed and nobody knows. But to be able to say, like, hey, you're really good at that. Can you teach me? Which we don't do very often.
We don't.
Yeah.
And I think we often, like, get into this mode of, like, well, it's false humility or false modesty. And I'm like, well, you know what? If you're going to err, I don't know. I feel like that's better. If you're grappling, it's like, okay, you can live in ego or you can live in false. And I'm not saying live in either of those, but
it's funny though, because I feel like I err on the side of false humility, and I'm like, I wish I actually had some more confidence. I wish I
Yeah.
could walk into a room with more confidence, but I don't think pride is the answer.
Yeah, well, confidence. So I don't know that I correlate confidence and pride.
Oh. Or is confidence the healthy form of pride?
I think it's a healthy form. Confidence is a unifier to me.
Okay.
And the two can get flipped easily.
Yeah, overconfident.
Double-edged side of the sword.
Like sometimes I wish I didn't care at all. But anybody thought I could just go in. Who cares? This is me, unapologetically.
Like sometimes how you deal with Zach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ignorance is bliss.
So, I think no matter whatever side you err on, I think you probably wish you erred on the other
I
side.
totally agree.
Yeah. Grass is always greener.
Yeah,
And that's why I'm saying maybe let's focus on replacing envy with value.
right.
It's like, okay, I get that I am not complete yet. And in that process, can I value the people in my community enough to be a learner? And then, does that usher us in towards unity? And I'm feeling like yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
We all know that guy who walks into the networking event or the restaurant and he's wearing something outlandish and talking to everybody like just over the top. You're like, I want that guy's confidence. Like totally ungrounded. Like this guy is wild. You know who you are.
Confidence.
Oh,
that
yeah.
guy should not be confident.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's usually my thought. I'm like, man, but I need to tap into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like I need to challenge myself to show up a little bit more, saying all sorts of crazy things. You know who you are. No. Okay. So my point being like, then diving into humility, the definition of humility is that I've always heard is it's not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. Would you guys agree with that?
I don't know that. Yeah, yes, but I also think it's humility for me is thinking about others more.
So proposing there's an even better definition.
Well, maybe it's how you look at the world. For me, that's a better definition because it keeps me more grounded. If I'm walking around looking for ways to serve others, to learn from others, to elevate others, to release their greatness, that helps to serve me in humility and ultimately unity.
Yeah, I do agree with that like general definition of humility, but I think when we're talking about in relation to like the opposite of pride or in relation to unity, I think it's pursuing or understanding that you don't have all the answers and then seeking that out through people and pursuing like listening. And so maybe this is a way more complicated that's way more simple, but I think it's
Yeah, this is not going to fit on a bumper sticker.
but just be willing to not be the smartest person in the room, and then instead of envying the other person, just go seek out what they know and then figure out how to implement that into your life. Or is that kind of, I don't know if that's a good definition or not.
Oh, totally. And I think it's a great invitation. So for anybody listening to this, I wish we could just offer you 3 simple steps towards being a simple, super humble unifier. But I don't think that's how this thing works. It's a process and it's a journey and it's an ongoing conversation that we're able to invite others into.
Yeah.
And
Okay, this just came to me. This might be terrible. This
is going to go on a bumper sticker.
buckle up, y'all.
Yeah.
No, this might need to be cropped out. But
Okay.
I think I could boil it down to humility is like curiosity in other people.
Okay.
Because if you're curious about people, you're not judging them. If you're curious about people, you're not thinking you're like you're willing to learn. And so I think it's being curious in all situations.
I like it.
You can tell me if it doesn't land.
Okay, so from a business perspective,
Uh-huh.
you've got a service, you've got a product that you have. I think pride would keep you fixated on what you do. But I think humility would make you curious to go see what your competitors are doing. And then instead of looking at their website and going, we suck, which is again I don't know if I call it false humility, but it's not looking at it going, we suck. It's just saying, okay, like this is what our competitors are doing. Good on them. Now we're going to do that as well. Like you're accumulating, but it starts with the curiosity. If you're not curious, you can't learn from people.
Okay, humility starts with curiosity.
I
How
like
about
it.
that?
That can go on a bumper sticker.
Quote that mug.
Yeah,
We got somewhere.
I like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't end there, but it starts there.
Yeah,
No, I think that's good. And even thinking through your example, I'm like, if I'm curious about my competition, maybe I'm still being prideful. Like there's some comparison there. If you're curious in the customer with the intent of loving and serving the customer, things are going to work out much better for you.
that's right.
Like this idea, we all think we're the hero of our own story, but really like fullness in life and work comes when you position yourself as a guide for others and treat them like they're the hero.
Absolutely. We talk a lot about, in leadership, we trade our power for our people's greatness. What we don't say is we trade our greatness for theirs. This isn't about putting yourself down. It's about elevating everyone else. And if you're literally doing that in every conversation every day, you're going to be more unified. In Australia, they have this thing called the tall poppy syndrome. And basically, as a society, they've been known to go after anybody who kind of rises above. It's like, yeah, they're like, cut it off. Like, you're better than everyone else, then they're all going to attack you. To me, it's like, it's the reverse of that.
Crabs
that
in a
creates-
bucket. You're a main guy. You ever heard that?
No.
Like the crabs in the bucket, and then the crabs try and crawl out, but the other crabs, they're trying to get out of the bucket too. So they pull down the crabs that get any. If they all work together, they could all get out of the bucket.
Okay.
There
You go.
you go. That's kind of a mic drop.
Yeah.
Tall poppies and
Instead
crabs
of
in a
pulling
bucket.
people down,
Yeah.
pick them up.
Yeah. What is it?
Bloody nailed it.
When the water in the harbor rises, all the boats rise.
Okay, as
Now we're
cheesy
just
as all
throwing out
of this is,
cliches.
though, it makes sense.
It does. We just don't
We
live
don't
by
treat it.
Yeah.
We don't actually do it, but
Yeah. It's the reverse. It's like, okay, you want to unify? Well, build everyone else up. You want to go it alone? Cut everyone down. I mean, and I know that sounds harsh, but to me, that's the reality. Those are the binary choices that we make. One's in pride and one's in humility.
Once again, thank you guys for joining the conversation. We look forward to meeting you at an event in Austin, Texas. But until then, if you could like, comment, share, and give us some feedback in the information box below. Leave us a review. That would mean the world to us. Till next episode.